Today, I'm excited to welcome Nathan, the Brooklyn Bitcoin Meetup group organizer, to the podcast. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks for reaching out to me on Nostr. This is my first time on a podcast, so I'm super excited to have this discussion with you.
Well, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you. Tell us about your background.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I went to pharmacy school in Brooklyn as well, and I live here where I work as a pharmacist in a hospital for about 10 years now.
And do you enjoy that?
Yeah, it gives me a lot of opportunities to work with people. I also work on the IT side of things, so it's a little bit different than a traditional pharmacist. But yeah, it does give me some fulfillment. I feel like I'm helping people, and that's really what's important to me.
And tell us how you found Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I often say that you don't usually find Bitcoin, but Bitcoin finds you. And for me, it was a bit of luck because there isn't much in my background that is related to finance. Obviously, I work for money and I'm aware of money, but I wasn't super into investing or personal finance until around mid 2019, actually. And so that's when I started to just learn some of the basics about investing, things like stocks, ETFs, real estate, things like timing the market better than timing the market, diamond hands, buying the dip, those sort of concepts. And then it wasn't until around the beginning, I think January of 2020, when someone just offhand, I think it was a coworker who just mentioned, "Oh, look at Bitcoin." And I said, "Oh, well," because previously I would have trouble even maybe finding the price, but I had recently opened the Robinhood account, and so I figured, oh, why don't I just take a look at the price? And so as I'm opening my Robinhood app, I'm kind of pricing Bitcoin in my head on my own. I figured, oh, it's probably maybe $100, $200. And so to my surprise, I found that it was in the beginning of January 2020 was mid 7,000 K. I was like, wow, who's going to pay $7,000 for a whole Bitcoin? So that kind of forced me to do a little bit more research into it. And one of the first things that I learned was about the halving cycles. And so since the halving was expected May 2020, it seemed like an opportune time to get into Bitcoin, to get into altcoins, as from everything that I was reading and I was watching told me that the price is expected to go up. And so I figured, well, this is maybe an opportunity to maybe, I don't know, double my money or something. So that's kind of what led me into it. And then I spent a good amount of time learning about Bitcoin, learning about the cryptocurrency in general, cryptocurrency scene in general. And directionally, from a price standpoint, 2020 and 21 were very, very good to me. It wasn't until 2022 where I really became like a Bitcoin Maxi, as they say, Bitcoin only. And that was through the debacles of the BlockFis and the Celsius of the world, and especially Terra Luna, which I had owned a bit of. And it wasn't the fact that I had lost money, but it was that, wow, one of these big projects went to zero. And so it was to say, well, what's the real difference between Bitcoin and all these other altcoins? And so it was from there that I started to watch different YouTubers, different podcasts. So I wish I had taken a screenshot of the YouTube subscriptions I had previous to becoming Bitcoin only, of all these kind of just general crypto influencer type people, to now is the Bitcoin only space. And so certain people that I discovered at that point really influenced me. First was Corey Clipston from Swan. I had listened to an interview on him discussing the big differences. Others was Jeff Booth, who I know you had on your podcast, Jack Mallers of Strike, and Matthew Crater of what he would rename to Bitcoin University, with all big influences on me, among others. So once I decided to become Bitcoin only, it actually was kind of funny. It was a bit difficult to actually get rid of all my altcoins. So it took about 4 to 5 months in the middle of 2020. And the reason being, for some of them, I had actually experimented with some of these DeFi projects. So the value of the actual crypto in the DeFi project was less than the fees I would have to pay to remove them and then sell them. So it took a little bit of a while for it to make financial sense. But towards the end of 22, I was able to become officially Bitcoin only. And that coincided around the time of the FTX debacle, and which I kind of started to anticipate. It had a similar feel to Luna, and I had some people that I had been talking to at that point, I sort of said, this happens, this is going to be a big price dip, and it's a great opportunity to buy. And that was the bottom of the last bear market, that end of November and December of 22. So that's what led me to be a Bitcoin Maxi and Bitcoin only in the space now.
So you've had some quite good timing. Tell us a little bit about why you decided not to continue with the alts. I know some people are very good traders and you can make money in them. Why did you decide to go all in on Bitcoin?
Yeah, there's definitely a few reasons. I think one of the biggest reasons is actually the Bitcoin origin story. So it's a fun fact is that actually Bitcoin didn't trade at any price for the first 2 years of its existence. So it was just the value of it was just the idea of hard money. The people that found it fascinating, the novelty of it, they just were mining it on their computers, or their laptops even, and they were just excited about that idea. So yeah, from the beginning, they didn't even trade it at a price. So just the idea of cryptocurrency having a price was just like a novelty in itself, like a discovery. Nowadays, if you try to issue your own coin at no price, people wouldn't understand why you were doing that. The whole point is that it has a price and that the price is going to go up. So that's definitely one of the big differences. The other difference is there's no centralized attack vector for Bitcoin. It does not have a CEO. It's the only truly decentralized money that has ever really existed. And with these other altcoins, there was always a central point of failure. And also it's just there's just so many promises that were unmet from these projects. So through those two fundamental principles, that's where I had to branch off and just become Bitcoin only.
Yeah, and unless you're an expert trader or you follow those protocols very closely, it's very difficult to know which ones are going to do well.
Yeah,
And
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, you asked me about trading. Yeah, that's I mean, I did pick that up in my like initial learning about investing as timing the market versus timing the market. And so yeah, if you try, I mean, you can try to trade pretty much anything. If you try to trade, even if you try to trade Bitcoin, you're most like 99% most likely not going to perform as well as if you just bought and hold the asset. And it's also the amount of time that you spend. I mean, I know there are some people that are successful, but not the that's the minority. But the amount of time you would spend trading back and forth, buying, selling, and the tax implications, it's just so much easier to just buy the asset, hold it, and just wait for it to do its thing.
yeah, those are really good points. So you started out investing in real estate and you bought some investment properties. Tell us about that and why you decided to get out.
Yeah, it's a pretty good story actually. So if you had asked me around the end of 2019 and 2020 what I would be more interested in, like maybe real estate or like this cryptocurrency thing, I definitely would have said that like real estate was kind of going to be my thing. So someone had mentioned to me around that time in 2019 that someone they knew had bought a real estate property out of state, and I was like, well, why would somebody do that? It doesn't like this. Like, what are they going to use that for? Like a vacation home or like I couldn't understand it. So I started to look into that a little bit more about what's a rental property and what are the options for out of state. Because for me, real estate was never an option. I'm living in New York, and I couldn't afford to buy like a rental property. And there also the laws for landlords are a bit rough here. So between those factors, I really was very priced out. But I ended up looking into out-of-state real estate, and I used this website called roofstock.com. And there they actually had listings of these turnkey properties. So the turnkey property being the property with a tenant that's already there, and the seller trying to sell you the property with their tenant already there. So that was actually pretty interesting because I could buy a property, let's say, and then have a tenant right away, and we could start to cash flow. So that was the basic idea. And so through some more research, I decided on Alabama, so Birmingham, Alabama, as where I was going to buy some real estate. And I just kind of went for it. And I ended up buying, I actually, both times, I ended up buying two at a time, which is just kind of, it's just a coincidence, I guess, but it just kind of happened that way. So by the beginning of 2020, really before the pandemic started to take hold, I had 4 rental properties all of a sudden, and it was a very interesting process of acquiring them and getting property management because obviously I was far away from the properties and I needed somebody to help me with that. So I was able to find a property management company, And then all the math that goes into it. I'm kind of a math person, so that did appeal. And I was doing all this personal finance. I was tracking my spending and tracking the cash flows and all these different things. So it did really appeal. And so as long as the numbers made sense, it was an interesting venture. And so it was something I was doing as like, I guess became sort of a diversification. I had exposure to ETFs like S&P 500 ETFs. I started to get into crypto, and then I had these rental properties. And so as time went on, certain ones worked out better than others. Certain tenants worked out better. I went through some different experiences. And what the main problem for me was that every time I had to get a new tenant, the re-renting costs were prohibitive. And I found that the profits I were making during the year were completely wiped out by that. And so I started to realize that this was kind of an unsustainable venture. I was sort of just leaking money slowly. And so fortunately for me, with all the money printing and inflation, these properties, which are not appreciation properties, these were cash flow properties, basically almost like all of them appreciated about like 50%. It was pretty crazy, and it was fortunate for me. So I was able to sell these at profits, but it also kind of showed that there's something very, very wrong with the system, that these properties that didn't, they weren't better 4 years later, and they were somehow 50% more valuable. So and so I decided to sell around mid 2023. I just sold the last property earlier this year, 24. So it took me, and I knew it would, but it took me 4 years to liquidate the whole portfolio. And so it's just another one of the advantages of Bitcoin. It's like if I'm out, it's fine. I could just transfer it to an exchange and sell, and I'll go my merry way. So that the amount of paperwork also to buy, paperwork to sell, it's just a headache. You have to get a notary to come. I had to get a notary to come to my house. So all in all, it was a really interesting and good experience, and I was fortunate that I did well fiat wise, but I definitely lost Bitcoin wise. If I were to do all the calculations, I know for sure. So it definitely gave me a perspective on real estate, a perspective on investing. But I'm so much happier now, and just a much more simple investment strategy. When people ask me what I'm doing, I was like, oh yeah, I just buy Bitcoin, that's it. It's like, what do you mean that's not complicated enough? I'm like, no, it's complicated. It's complicated enough for me.
So did you decide to sell your real estate for Bitcoin? Was that the reason?
So it eventually became Bitcoin. I don't think I directly took the proceeds and put it right into Bitcoin right away. But that actually leads me to another concept, I guess, that I kind of thought of it. I call it Bitcoin shifting. So you have people like, let's say, DCAing, and you're sort of slowly taking your money, your wealth, and you're kind of shifting it into Bitcoin. And so it's just a way for me to like shift my funds into Bitcoin, my value and my time and effort into Bitcoin. And I was actually talking to someone. I'm like, the fiat mindset versus the Bitcoin mindset is really the main switch to conviction. In that, I'm actually more concerned about the money that I have in my bank, the U.S. dollars that I have in my bank, which isn't actually really there and could be frozen and taken from me pretty easily, than I do. Well, Bitcoin's price goes down 30% one day or something. Like, at least I have access to it. So I think that's the mind shift. And so, like, I wanted to move that wealth that I had created in real estate. It definitely most of it went into Bitcoin.
I love that term, Bitcoin shifting.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. Are there any other areas of the mindset that has changed for you since going from fiat to Bitcoin?
I think one of the typical answers to that is probably like hope and low time preference, and it definitely helps me. I think as we get older, I feel like we're sort of going through the motions. We have a very, if you're lucky, you have a steady routine where you go to work and then you go home and you do family things or you try to plan something, but then ultimately you're just kind of in this cycle. And like, not everyone necessarily has like a clear path. When you're younger, you're going to graduate, you're going to go to college, you're going to get this job, you're going to learn this and that. But when you get older, you sort of, like, it's very easy to kind of plateau. So one thing is definitely that I'm always like, excited for the next Bitcoin thing, and that definitely keeps me going. And also, I just feel like I know that my value, like my time, is going to be preserved. And inflation now is kind of a hot topic, and people don't equate it to Bitcoin at all. I think for the most part, of just, regular people, regular, just normie coworkers and stuff. But, it doesn't bother me at all, because I know that my value is being preserved over time and space. And so it's just not a problem. The other thing, then we can get into the meetups part of our discussion. I've just been able to meet so many cool new people. As you get older, it's also difficult to make friends. Like, you kind of have to have a reason to meet new people. And Bitcoin is like really one of the perfect ways to, because it's very niche and still very, very small. And so people are very excited to meet you if you're into Bitcoin, if you're both Bitcoiners, and like you automatically have that in common, and just you definitely have a good conversation coming up. So that also definitely changed me, just giving me the opportunity to meet like so many new people that I just definitely would have never met.
Well, so tell us, you started the Brooklyn Bitcoin Meetup group. How did that come about?
Yeah, so once around the time I was becoming Bitcoin only, or basically finished with that in the end of 22, I figured, like, since everyone was coming out after the pandemic, it would be a really good idea to, like, well, I could meet other Bitcoiners, and so like it would help me with my conviction, and I could learn. And so the first place I looked was meetup.com, and it wasn't quite as easy to find the Bitcoin meetup. Also, there was some groups, but some of them had events that had taken place like maybe years ago and didn't have any new events coming up. It's also, you don't know who to trust. It's you're just meeting people in real life, and you have to have your wits about you a bit. So what I actually ended up going to a more general crypto meetup group that was well organized. It was called Crypto Mondays. So naturally, they met every Monday, so you wouldn't forget. And so, but it was actually a very well organized meetup. They had a private space. Many people came. There was an hour. The first hour was like a meet and greet. You could just talk, make friends, discuss, and then they would have a fireside chat with some guests, usually related to a crypto project or something, or some field that was implementing blockchain or something. So I was very impressed with that. I did meet some cool people through that, and I did end up going a few times. But I was still in search of a Bitcoin only meetup. And so the next one I ended up finding was it was this very generic New York City Bitcoin meetup group on meetup.com, and they just said, oh, they recently moved to a new location. And so little did I know, this new location was, I don't know if you're familiar with PubKey. So PubKey that was around, I guess that was like October 22 or late 22. And so they had just bought PubKey. So for those of you who don't know, but PubKey is a Bitcoin bar in Lower Manhattan. And it's been on the news pretty recently. I'm sure you guys have heard. And so at that point, it had not been built up the way that it is now. So they just had a very generic Bitcoin meetup there, and I didn't even know the name of the place. So I went there, and I was a little bit early, and I asked the bartender, where is the Bitcoin meetup? And although it wasn't quite that helpful to me at the moment, it was pretty epic of him to say, every day is a Bitcoin meetup here. And so it was a kind of just a generic kind of meetup. It wasn't really organized exactly, but I did manage to meet a few people who were Bitcoiners who were there for the same purpose. And so that was pretty nice, but I did not know what would end up happening there. They have so many great events, educational sessions about different topics like mining or lightning. They have special guests, all kinds of some parties. So they became really a powerhouse in the Bitcoin space, and very famous, really. But at the time, I was still looking for a meetup where it was a little bit, maybe a little bit more organized, like the Crypto Mondays, but it was Bitcoin only. So I was willing to travel a bit, and so I did end up finding the Jersey City Bitcoin Meetup group. And they had a Telegram group where I could, request to be a member. And then when I joined that, they welcomed me and they asked me, who I was and how I found the group. So I felt that was really encouraging, because I was going to have to travel a little bit, and they were very responsive. So I went to Jersey City. So that for me, coming from Brooklyn, I had to go into Manhattan and then take another train into Jersey City to the west. So, but it was definitely well worth it, because when I got there, they were very welcoming. They asked me what about my Bitcoin journey, and they asked, answer any of my questions I had, and it was like just a really great group of guys, and I really, really enjoyed it. And so from there, I thought to myself, well, I would really love to have this, but I wish it was closer. And so that's kind of where the idea of, well, maybe I could just start my own Bitcoin meetup group. I would just do it in Brooklyn. And so from there, I signed up for Meetup.com and I created the Meetup group, and I was able to attract a good number of people on actually Meetup.com. And I think I scheduled about from between the end of 22 to mid 23. I scheduled about maybe like 4 meetups. I would say the first one and the last one were the best. And the first one I got the most people, and the last one was on May 22nd, Bitcoin Pizza Day. So I had it in a like a pizzeria, and we got pizza, and it was really fun. But once I finished that event, I had really pulled all the strings I could, because I had met some people from PubKey, which I kept going to, who they started having events, and through Meetup.com a little bit, although they didn't quite attract. It didn't quite. I think it attracted some people, but I don't think they were serious about coming to meetups. And so since I had pulled all the, I even invited a friend that I met at Crypto Mondays, so who was more Bitcoin leaning. But after that, I kind of felt satisfied with it, and I didn't really know where to go with it, because it just wasn't getting enough attention. It was probably short-sighted at the time. So then early this year, I was talking to someone about meetup groups, and then someone who actually attended mine was there, and I was like, oh yeah, remember the old Brooklyn Bitcoin Meetup group? And he's like, if you had kept it up, it would have grown and all that. I was like, oh, maybe. And so I think that kind of inspired me to try again. And the other thing that was that there was a lot of more infrastructure for meeting Bitcoiners. So things like, first of all, I have become a little bit active on Twitter, and I had joined some Twitter Spaces, which were interesting. PubKey was becoming more popular, and so you could go to PubKey and say, well, I also have a meetup group. Would you want to attend if you're coming from Brooklyn or from Long Island? Also, the Orange Pill app became very popular, and I was, oh, that's really cool. And so I signed up for the Orange Pill app, and so it's really like a hack. I can I just introduce myself to everyone in the area. Sometimes I get a response, sometimes not, but I just introduce myself to everyone on the app, and so it's a little bit. I guess it's a little bit awkward. I really do like the app, but I have like sort of a purpose, because I'll sort of like introduce myself, have a little back and forth, and then say like, would you want to go to an in-person meetup? And they also allow you to post your event on the website on the app. So that's also really helpful. So from there, I was able to attract more people. And then a little bit later, also, I got into Nostr, and that also helped. So between those different factors, I started it up again. I didn't do it through Meetup.com. I actually posted on Eventbrite, and then a few different other places, as I like Orange Pill app and some other Nostr-related posts and things. And so from there, I started it up again. And then the other thing I took, I was trying to kind of replicate the Jersey City meetup group. So I created a Telegram group that I had previously created, I didn't mention, but that I like, because at least it gets people in one place. And so like once I have people's attention, and then I get them talking to each other maybe, and get them excited, and then post memes and post discussions, and here and there, it's really very helpful. And so it's been able to grow. And so I think we're having our 8th meetup this month for this year, and it's steadily growing. Sometimes we get maybe only 2-3 people. Last meetup we actually got 11 people to show, so I feel like there's a lot of good momentum. And for me, as I'm just able to make more Bitcoiner friends, that's really the main goal for me, and everything else is icing on the cake.
Well, you sound like the perfect guy to have it. Really friendly and motivated to meet Bitcoiners, and it sounds like a wonderful event.
Thanks, Paula. It's really sweet of you to say.
When is your next one?
It's actually tomorrow.
Cool.
So today is election day. I know this will come out later, but we'll definitely have some stuff to talk about tomorrow.
Well, since it is election day, and you mentioned PubKey, which is where former President Trump went to spend Bitcoin, right? That's where he did. So, and people are very divided on the issues. But as far as Bitcoin goes, do you think it will make a difference in the short term who gets in?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I'm definitely not trying to be a super political person. I think, especially during the meetups and on Nostr, that's not how I present. I think that the main thing is that Bitcoin will do what Bitcoin's going to do. You can see that if it's under stress, then it's resilient. And if it's under good conditions, then it's going to prosper for sure. Just a very good example is the China mining ban. and you just see that the hash rate just plummeted and the price went down, and then people just got up and they went other places, and because there's just a monetary incentive that's undeniable. So it's just the incentives are aligned, and Bitcoin is the hardest money of all. The people are going to go for the best product. So in the short term, I've dealt with short term volatility many times. I began to tell you a story actually. When I first got into Bitcoin, this was the beginning of 2020, and I had bought some. I had actually kept it in self custody. I had done those things, and so I wake up March. I think it was March 12th, and I checked the price as usual in the morning, and I seen it come down from like 8K to like I think I saw it at 3.8K, 4K, and I was like, just looking at the price, and then at this time I was also pretty entrenched in the personal finance side, TradFi type of mindset, but it translates. And I was like, well, if all the things I read about is like not panic selling and like, just hold an asset and wait, if I'm really going to do all that, like, this is the time to just not panic at all. And I actually did end up buying a little bit more. I so wish I had bought more and more in that period of time. And then, through the monetary policies that would happen later, and whether it's fair or not is a different story. But it was so exciting in that summer when just the price went back up, and by that summer the price was back to where I was when I had first got into Bitcoin. And this is like just such a good lesson to not overreact, and really know what you're investing in. And if you have really high conviction in Bitcoin, and there really is no issue. As long as you are financially responsible and you understand the asset, you should be fine.
That's such a great lesson. I was going to ask you about that in the beginning because you said you bought in the beginning of 2020, and I know there was a big crash during the pandemic, well, when it started. And yeah, what a great buying opportunity. But the lesson is that the world events can happen, presidential elections can happen, but long term Bitcoin there's only ever going to be 21 million. The fundamentals behind it are just better than anything we've ever seen. So it's just a good thing to remember as a long term holder.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that I mentioned, usually I find the 20K price very fascinating in that I wasn't around for this, but in 2017, it was the market top, and it was complete euphoria and excitement. The price is going up forever and all that. And then you have in the end of 2020, you have it back at 20, coming from the bear market out of the bear market into the potential bull market. And not quite the euphoria as before, but very much excitement, and we're happy we're back, and getting ready for the next run. And then you have the next time it hits 20K is a complete depression and just fear, and Bitcoin is dead, and that's the Luna / FTX period of time. And so it's the same price, but the feelings are so different, And then of course you had it finally rebounding again back to 20K. And it's like, well, all right, is this real? It's not, like you don't even know how to feel anymore. So I just find certain prices like that very fascinating, and the difference of emotions, but the underlying asset stays the same, and so that's really what you have to focus on. And a buy that you deem is too expensive today, in 4 years it will be deemed as a bargain.
Yeah, that's true. And you remind me, Jeff Booth always reminds us that he doesn't focus on the price in Bitcoin because one Bitcoin is always going to be one Bitcoin, whereas fiat, we continue to print and print. And so we don't know what $1 actually is worth in the long term.
Right. Yeah, it's actually one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, but it's even more than that because it's the total supply will always be the total supply, and so the one Bitcoin represents that of the total supply forever, and so that's really key.
Yeah, and that brings me back to a chart that you sent me that I'm going to post on the screen when I share this. That chart is the Bitcoin real estate chart, and it shows that the average price of a single family home is falling when priced in Bitcoin. And in 2024, it's around 6.6 Bitcoin. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite charts to show people. It just really opens your eyes. And when you say everything is going to zero in Bitcoin terms, it kind of doesn't make sense to most people. But I think a chart like this really illustrates what the benefit of holding Bitcoin through the cycles are, and just the difference in how much Bitcoin a house would cost you back 8 years ago versus now is just really eye opening. So people just don't realize that, but I think this chart kind of says it all.
Yeah, and just to give my personal example, I bought a property at the beginning of 2020 in Miami for 21 Bitcoin, or around 200,000 US dollars. And I sold it in beginning of 2024 for about double. And there was about 8 Bitcoin at the time. So even in that short amount of time, went from 21 to 8 approximately. And yeah, I know obviously in a bear market, it might change a little bit, but long term, everything is falling when priced in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. The other one I think of is, I think it's a bit easier to do even if you work a 9 to 5. You can take your salary denominated in Bitcoin. And so I did that when I was started in 2020, and then I compare it to it now. And even though the fiat salary has increased some, actually my salary has actually gone down about 70% in Bitcoin terms, this is just crazy. It just goes to show you with Bitcoin it's really, you have to put in the time. You're not going to see a big change in a week or a month or 6 months, but if you really give it that 4+ years chance, which is very hard for people because it's not a long. I wouldn't say it's a long period of time, but it's not a short period of time either. To sacrifice, let's say 4 years on this experiment is a bit of a commitment. So, but if you do wait, if you're able to get some, and then you're able to hold on for that period of time, you'll see the difference. And just like our example with real estate or with salaries, or you can take you can take any item you can purchase and you can see the difference. And even though the prices are very high, everyone is concerned. If you just denominate it in Bitcoin, everything's down. It's really eye opening.
Have you orange pilled any friends or family?
So that's a good question. So I think when I first got into Bitcoin, I was really enthusiastic about orange pilling. I mean, it really depends on the person, but I find it very difficult, and I find it a topic that if someone's not that familiar with it in general, that they can get kind of frustrated with you if you're too pushy maybe, or you're too enthusiastic, and they might have their own preconceived notions about it too. And so I really tend not to bring it up to people unless it comes out so overtly, but at work or with normie friends. And there's actually a few that I've been telling for a very long time, but they just don't quite take to it. And if someone isn't willing to take the orange pill, then that's their own decision. And that's why actually a difference, my perspective in how my meetups would be actually changed, because I initially thought there would be like a lot of interest of people that didn't have Bitcoin or didn't know much about it, but or wanted to come and ask questions. And I find that was very few and far between. Most of it, and really what I really enjoy, are the people who are just Bitcoiners already, and they're just interested in learning more. I really look. You could be a Bitcoiner, and I would consider a Bitcoiner as soon as someone who leaves their coins on the exchange. They have it and they're aware of it. I would recommend them taking to self custody, but they're still a Bitcoiner. They're still interested in the space, and there's just so many different levels. There's taking to self custody. There's learning about UTXOs. There's Lightning. There's Nostr. There's like a kind of a side chain of it. There's just running your own node. There's just so many different levels. So you just want to keep. It's like Bitcoiners that come. I just want them to keep improving and getting better, and just increasing their conviction. Hopefully, stacking more sets, or at least hodling, and just having a good time. Also, just making friends. And the other thing that I'm really excited about is all the diversity of skills that I attract to my meetups. We have some people that maybe are in the Bitcoin space, but the vast majority are actually just working regular jobs. We have an engineer. We have a personal trainer, we have a physical therapist, we have a retired math teacher, we have some people in finance, we have some photographers. So it's it's just exciting to build up this kind of Bitcoin community. It's sort of it's like a seed of an economy that can build up. And like if I needed something from somebody, like I could just go to one of them and then I could maybe pay them in Bitcoin for some kind of good or service. And so the more meetups I do, the more new people I attract, and like the more the economy slowly grows. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think you're making some really good points. As Brian the Mint said the other day, he said how important it is to have a Bitcoin community, and that's what you're building. Why do you think it's hard for the other people? Do you think they think it's still a bit of a scam, or it's unregulated, or they just don't have enough pain in their life?
I think it definitely. I think there's the American experience, and so then there's outside America experience. I think, and there's just definitely different perspectives. So just speaking from like the American perspective, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and then I explain to you that the money's broken and you need to be putting your money into this other thing, and they're like, I don't have any money to put into it. It's kind of like not that helpful. So I think that's definitely one of the struggles. Also, time is also a struggle. Time is the most scarce resource, and so you have to put in some time to Bitcoin. Like for me, it took me I guess 2 years to become Bitcoin only, and then the next 2 years I went down more rabbit holes and learned so much more about Bitcoin now that I knew then, even though I thought I knew a lot then, and that's like 4 years of work. And you can't just go up to someone and for 10-minute conversation and be like, here's all my conviction, and you just don't make all these mistakes that I did. Like some of it is actually important that you make some of these mistakes, because then it actually has some like emotional meaning to you. So that's that. I think that the amount of I think it's the money that's available to actually invest or get involved in Bitcoin is a problem, especially if you don't have that conviction. And then it's the amount of time that it does take to really get convicted. So it's something, it's difficult to see, but it's something hard to unsee.
That's a great statement. Difficult to see, but hard to unsee. So you mentioned UTXOs and Nostr. Tell us why you love Nostr so much.
Yeah, so I recently got into Nostr. I think, it was interesting actually. One of the things I noticed about myself or about people, once you learn a few things, you're really very happy with yourself. And then when you want to then learn a new thing, you're kind of resistant, even though you've been learning a bunch of new things and that have been so beneficial to you. So Nostr was kind of like that too. I was into Twitter. I mean, now it's X. I was into their spaces and things like that, but didn't really give Nostr too much. I was aware of it, but I didn't give Nostr that much time of day. But as one of the members of the meetup group was telling me I should probably look into it more, and now I'm the one telling people to look into Nostr. So once I got it started, I really do enjoy it. I think there's no algorithm, and so it's a little bit just more fair to interact with people. It's also Bitcoin is native to it, so you can zap people, which is fun. Yeah, so it's definitely just very welcoming to Bitcoiners. So I enjoy connecting with people with Nostr. I hope to use a similar an app on Nostr that's similar to Telegram. Hopefully in the future, where I can attract people to that instead of Telegram. But but for now, Telegram works. But Nostr is just a different way to interact with Bitcoiners and with people in general. And then you can, again, the nice thing is you can zap each other and show your appreciation. I mean, likes and comments are nice, but if you actually give actual value to somebody for their value, that's really awesome. As far as UTXOs, which I think is a really fascinating concept. The problem being that especially if you use something like Ledger Live, it doesn't really show you your UTXOs, and that can be problematic, because if you're, say, DCAing and removing from exchange on a daily basis, you may end up with many UTXOs that are very small, and this could be problematic because with transaction fees increasing, you may not be able to actually spend your Bitcoin, as more UTXOs in a transaction causes the fees to increase as well. And so if the fees are similar to my DeFi issue, if the fees are higher than the actual value of sending, there's kind of no point. So that was something. It's actually something I learned on Space on X that I just kind of I just came up on stage and I asked them what a UTXO was because I just kept hearing that, but I didn't understand it. And then I was actually, as a math person, I found it very fascinating. So I use Sparrow now, which is really very good to visualize all the UTXOs. And yeah, it's fun managing them. You want to have some bigger ones, some smaller ones. The prevailing recommendation is probably a minimum of 1 million Satoshis per UTXO. But I mean, that's all up for debate. And so it's just like interesting way to think about how Bitcoin works. It's just like a little bit, slightly more technical, but I think one of the most important educational aspects of Bitcoin to know for sure, because if you're planning for the future to use it, it's gonna affect the transaction fees for sure.
If you were DCAing, let's say 100 a week into, say, a Coinbase or a River app, if you waited till it got to 1,000 or 2,000, that would be a better UTXO, correct?
Right. So whatever you remove from an exchange to your wallet becomes a new UTXO. So yeah, depending on the price, I think a million satoshis, it comes out to about $700 because if the price is around 70K, it's fun to do that math too, as the how much a satoshi is worth or how much a certain amount of satoshis are worth, so to keep that in mind. So I think definitely that would be the minimum to move if it's like $700 now. To 2 million or 3 million is also a nice little buffer. As I said, it's hard to predict in the future what transaction fees will be, but definitely at least being aware. And yeah, so leaving your Bitcoin on an exchange for a little bit of time is actually beneficial in this case because you don't want to end up with these small UTXOs that you may not be able to move in the future.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. So tell us, how has Bitcoin changed you?
Yeah, I think it's similar to the earlier question. Definitely a common answer is hope for the future, low time preference, and then just like the access to all these great people that I'm meeting through my meetup group. It's just opened up a new world for me. And again, lots of people I just would never have interacted. We would just even have conversations like that, where it's like, oh, I would just never know you if it wasn't for Bitcoin. So that's really one of the most valuable things that I gain out of it in Bitcoin, not just price appreciation, but valuable relationships with people. So and I know I'm going to meet new exciting people, and like most people don't know that for sure. But I know that I'll meet a new person in my meetup tomorrow, and I'll meet somebody in the meetup I'll host next year, and you'll never know what opportunities lie around the corner.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the other thing is, we don't have that many people in our regular lives to talk to about Bitcoin, right? So it's great to
Yeah.
have these opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like that's why I feel like the value that I'm providing in that it's selfish because I want to make friends for myself, but I also like, look, you can interact with all these other great people, and so I'm gonna bring new great people to interact with existing great people that I know, and so the connections that they make adds to my enjoyment of the whole experience.
Well, thank you. Tell us where people can find you and your meetup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you search for Nathan, Nathan, and then the letter T, so Nathan T, I'll pop up on Nostr. And if you want to find our meetup group, if you go to a website called bitcoinonly.events and just search Brooklyn, there's a page with a little description and some of the events that we past events or a future event that we're going to host. Anybody who's welcome to reach out to me if you find yourself in New York City. I've had some people reach out to me, and I've tried to schedule meetups to accommodate them. And it's always nice to get perspectives from. We've had people from different states. We've had people from out of the country as well, and so that's also really nice to get those perspectives, and people really appreciate that. So feel free to reach out to me whenever you like.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. You did really well on your first podcast, and I see you going really far in the Bitcoin space.
Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate you reaching out to me on Nostr. It was such an exciting surprise, and I had so much fun. And this is just a great discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, you provide a lot of value, and I am glad that you were able to make it.